This is Pulse of Africa, the face of Ethiopia, the voice of Africa.
Hello viewers, you're watching Pulse of Africa. I'm Jalani Tesfaye for the main news. First, our top stories for today. Prime Minister Abiy urges establishing Continental Public Health Agency. Botswana to seek 1.5 gigawatt of solar power to speed green transition. Germany shows to hold smartphone for Ukraine talks. Gold reaches a new milestone as global trade war escalates. Now, the news in detail. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has called upon fellow African leaders to join efforts in establishing our Continental Public Health Agency as a premier institution fully committed to advancing health across the continent. The Prime Minister toured Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC, on Friday. Ethiopia is proud to host the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC, a specialized public health agency of the African Union, the Premier said in a social media post. For member states, Prime Minister Abiy stated that it is incumbent upon us to strengthen this institution in collaboration with partners. Therefore, I call upon fellow African leaders to join efforts in establishing our Continental Public Health Agency as a premier institution fully committed to advancing health across the continent, he underscored. Now to Morocco. Morocco will host the 58th United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, and the Conference of African Ministers of Finance, Planning and Economic Development in March 2026. The announcement was made on Friday morning at the expert session of the 57th UNECA and the Conference of African Ministers of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, currently held in Addis Ababa from March 12 to 18. On this occasion, the choice of the kingdom to host this important conference was adopted unanimously with no objection, thus testifying to the renewed trust in Morocco's expertise and commitment in hosting events of continental scope. This decision reflects Morocco's ongoing and unwavering commitment to strengthening African cooperation and the continent's economic and social development. In Addis Ababa on Wednesday, Morocco was unanimously elected to chair the 57th UNECA and the Conference of African Ministers of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. Moving on to Benin. Benin President Patrice Talon on Friday said he would not stand for an unconstitutional third term in office, but would be watching the choice of his successor closely. The former businessman has been in charge of the small West African nation since 2016, and his second term of office comes to an end next year. I'm telling you again for the umpteenth time, no, I will not be a candidate, he said in an interview with John Afrique. This question troubles me. I have strengthened the Constitution myself to stipulate that no one can serve more than 2 terms in their life, he said. Shifting to IGAD. IGAD Executive Secretary Werkene Gebeyo met with IGAD Chair and President of Djibouti, Ismail Omar Guelleh, to deliberate on the outcomes of the 43rd Extraordinary Summit. discussions focused on implementing the summit's decisions and IGAD's ongoing efforts to restore peace in South Sudan. Recall the 43rd Extraordinary Assembly of the IGAD Heads of States and Governments convened virtually on March 12, 2025 to address the serious security situation in the Republic of South Sudan. In other news, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz will host French President Emmanuel Macron for talks on Ukraine next week ahead of an EU summit, the German government said Friday. The talks on Tuesday come as the Europeans scramble to come up with a unified position after a U.S. policy shift on the three-year conflict under President Donald Trump. European political topics will naturally form the focus of the discussion between the two leaders, but certainly the distressing international issues affecting us all will also play a role, particularly the developments in Ukraine, government spokesman Stefan Heibstreit told a press conference in Berlin. The meeting will serve as a preparation for a European Union summit in Brussels on Thursday and Friday, he added. Moving on to our next story. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Friday there is a very good chance the war between Russia and Ukraine can end after Washington had productive discussions with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday. He added that he had requested that Putin spare the lives of completely surrounded Ukrainian troops, apparently referring to Ukrainian forces being pushed back out of the Kursk region, their only foothold on Russian territory. We had very good and productive discussions with President Vladimir Putin of Russia yesterday, and there is a very good chance that this horrible, bloody war can finally come to an end, Trump said in a Truth Social post.
Africa is here, only on the Pulse of Africa channel, all the time. Pulse of Africa, the face of Ethiopia, the voice of Africa.
Turning to business news. Botswana this month will seek proposals for the construction of 1.5 gigawatts of solar power generation as it seeks to cut its reliance on coal, the country's mines and energy minister said. The largely desert nation, which relies on coal and power imports for its electricity, has set a target of 2030 to take advantage of its abundant sunlight by getting 50% of its power needs from renewable facilities. Jindal Steel and Power Limited is separately building coal-fired facilities to support 600 megawatts of power in the country. Finally, gold prices reached a new high while equity markets and crude oil continued to decline on Thursday amid an escalating global trade war. Risk-off sentiment prevailed in the financial markets due to economic and political uncertainties, shifting funds away from riskier assets. Gold prices reached a new high on Thursday, with gold futures at COMEX surging 1.5% briefly, surpassing a new milestone of $3,000 per ounce for the first time in history. Spot gold prices jumped 1.9% to $2,988 per ounce, making another all-time high. Gold is seen as a typical haven asset, with its prices rising more than 13% this year amid risk-aversion sentiment, a weakened U.S. dollar, and increasing central bank purchases. Before concluding, let us provide you with the latest updates on global commodities prices. Now to weather updates. That's all for today, and thanks for watching Pulse of Africa.
This is Pulse of Africa, the face of Ethiopia, the voice of Africa.